The LG G7 has arrived in the UK with all kinds of fanfare around that dual lens camera tech. As usual, you get a wide angle snapper to shoot your entire surroundings, you get some allegedly smart AI technology packed in there, and apparently it's quite good in low light situations as well. So I thought I would stack it up against two of its biggest rivals right now, the OnePlus 6 and the Huawei P20 Pro, which rocks a tri-lens camera, to see how it fares in a variety of situations, and here's the results. And for loads more on some super shiny, sexy mobile tech like these three bad boys, don't forget to give us a subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! First, a little bit about that camera hardware so you know exactly how these three stack up in terms of specs. To begin with, the LG G7 has a dual lens camera. There's a 16 megapixel primary lens with an f1.6 aperture and optical image stabilization to reduce any blurriness from handshakes and keep your results crisp. And that's backed by a 16 megapixel f1.9 aperture lens with a wide angle focus. The OnePlus 6 meanwhile has a dual lens camera as well. It's a 16 megapixel primary lens with an f1.7 aperture this time, again with some optical image stabilization built in, and that's backed by a 20 megapixel secondary lens with an f1.7 aperture again. And over on the P20 Pro, you get a tri-lens setup, a 40 megapixel primary lens with an f1.8 aperture and again a bit of OIS, and that's backed by a 20 megapixel f1.6 monochrome lens and an 8 megapixel f2.4 optical zoom lens with 3 times optical zoom. And a recent teardown suggests that both of those additional P20 Pro lenses also sport OIS, which is pretty impressive if it's true. All three of these phones also offer a bit of phase detection autofocus to latch onto your subjects, and in the case of the G7 and the P20 Pro, that is backed by laser autofocus, which is particularly handy for low light situations. Now of course, all three of these smartphone snappers are absolutely packed with features, and we won't go into all of them because this will turn into a 3-hour long Peter Jackson extravaganza, but we will mention the pertinent ones when it becomes relevant. Now, as you'd expect from these three flagship phones, all three of them offer really stunning results for your everyday shot. Detail levels are absolutely fantastic. You can blow them up onto your big 60-inch telly and they'll still look nice and crisp. When it comes to colours, the LG G7 and the OnePlus 6 are very good at producing natural hues. The P20 Pro is also capable of capturing quite realistic tones, but with that AI mode active, it tends to really boost the colours, so especially if you're shooting the likes of plant life, things like that, really vibrant scenes, they will be really in your face. Some people will love it and some people will probably barf. Good news if you have kids or pets though, because moving objects prove no problem whatsoever as long as the light is decent. You pretty much always get sharp, blur-free results. When the lighting conditions get a little bit tricky, all three definitely hold their own as well. When you're shooting against a bright sky, for instance, the LG G7 does occasionally lose some of that natural colour, which is something that the OnePlus 6 and the P20 Pro are very good at capturing. However, the G7 still captures plenty of detail in those darker areas, and all kinds of HDR scenes are well handled by all three of these phones. You get plenty of balance, which is the important thing, very little oversaturation, and still plenty of detail in those darker areas. The G7 performs particularly well when the scene is mostly dark with just mere splashes of light, although the P20 Pro is still excellent when it comes to that area. Of course, the one massive advantage that the G7 has over its two rivals here is wide angle shots. It can fit a really busy scene or a glorious vista into just a single shot, while the others you'll find that it's all cropped. You can kind of get around that with the panorama mode in some cases, but when you're shooting a scene with lots of people in it, you'll find that those people are then cloned and you get blurry results, and frankly the G7 just does it a whole lot better. Of course, the tables are turned when it comes to zooming into your subject. The P20 Pro's hybrid zoom offers a far crisper detail from a distance. That's particularly handy when you're trying to shoot some architectural detailing up high on a building or a distant monument, something like that. Now, of course, as we discussed, all three of these phones have at least two lenses slapped onto the back, which gives some proper depth perception, and as a result, you can of course take really strong portrait shots packed with bokeh-style blur and to really help your subject to stynd out. We're still leaning towards the P20 Pro in this area because the silhouettes are frankly absolutely stunning. You get very little blurring around the edges of your subject and that bokeh styling is fantastic. But to be honest, the OnePlus 6 and the LG G7 both stand up really strongly as well. The results are pretty much always fantastic. Now, one of LG's claims is that the G7 is one of the best shooters out there for low light and night shots. And to be honest, in low light, all three of these phones perform very admirably indeed. You get impressive details and a limited amount of grain. However, the G7 and the P20 Pro each have a secret weapon for some really killer results. On the G7 you have the super bright mode, which can be automatically or manually toggled whenever the lights are dim. We were a little bit skeptical before actually trying it out, but it really does make a difference, improving the clarity in darker areas and really boosting colours as well. Meanwhile, the P20 Pro has its night mode, and this also keeps the lens open for longer, countering any hand tremors with incredible accuracy. The result is some seriously sharp detail, and it's a bit of a step up from the G7 even. That said, the G7 does on occasion produce stronger colours in those low light shots, even better than the P20 Pro, which can occasionally look a little bit dull. So let's move on to video, and all three of these blowers offer full HD recording at either 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second. The G7, like the OnePlus 6 and the P20 Pro, offers very strong autofocus, snapping onto your subjects whether they're distant or close up, and moving between the two quite ably as well. You get quite attractive colour reproduction. Those images really pop, especially when you're shooting a vibrant scene such as a flower bed. Unfortunately, the stabilization is a little bit jarring, even with that steady recording mode active. With every step there's a slight tremor, which is just a little bit jarring and takes you out of the experience. Weirdly, the stabilization levels seem to be pretty much identical at 60 frames per second, and even when you bump up to the full 4K Ultra HD resolution. This is where weaker smartphones you would get more of a juddery action, and it would frankly become unwatchable. And of course, at that 4K resolution, the detail levels are fantastic and look really good when viewed back on your telly. In comparison, the Huawei P20 Pro offers slightly smoother stabilization at that full HD 30 frames per second level. Unfortunately, this degrades at 60 frames per second and when you jump up to 4K resolution as well, so you'll want to be as still as possible while shooting. Apart from that, the results are once again very detailed and great to view back on your TV. However, once again, when it comes to video, the OnePlus 6 is the big daddy of the bunch. Even at 4K, image stabilization is totally smooth. It's really impressive stuff, and even when you jump it all the way up to 4K at 60 frames per second. By the way, this is the only phone in this group to actually manage that level of recording. So that in a nutshell is how the LG G7 stacks up to the P20 Pro and the OnePlus 6 in terms of its shooting smarts. As I say, there are lots of extra bonus modes and everything. We've done a deep dive into the LG G7's camera tech here on TechSperts, go check that out. And for an in-depth review of the LG G7's camera, go check out our video over on Recombo. Thanks for watching everyone, don't forget to give us a subscribe and ding that notifications bell. And as always, love you, bye!